How many fake accounts do you think Facebook has removed from its platform in 2019? There's no need to give me a specific numbers. In terms of orders of magnitudes, how many would you estimate this number of fake accounts to be, knowing that Facebook seeks to have one account per human user? In your opinion, are we talking about thousands of accounts, tens of thousands of accounts, or millions of accounts removed, or something else? For a decade now, social networks have become part of our daily lives. Every time we take out our phones or open our computers, many of us receive notifications or look at the news feeds of Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, sometimes instinctively and without asking too many questions. However, behind every new Facebook post, every new tweet, and every new video you see, there is inevitably a complex story which comes from the interaction of many more or less benevolent entities and from an algorithmic sorting performed by the most sophisticated artificial intelligence systems that has ever existed. Every time you see a message on these platforms, there have been many forces at play to ensure that you see this message and not another. And today, I would like to emphasize the nature of these forces at play to try to convince you that they are generally not acting in your interest nor in the interest of humanity. And as a result, because of this, it seems urgent to consider that social networks have become dangerous, very dangerous. Dangerous, of course, for the users, but also and especially for public health and national security. Through cyber harassment, medical misinformation, or ideological radicalization, social networks are already causing horrible suffering, many deaths, and major concerns for the future of humanity. In order to measure the danger of social networks, it is useful to realize the stakes that these social networks represent for all sorts of more or less benevolent actors. And who better to talk about this than a 4-star general of the US force interviewed by Smarter Every Day.
When you look at conflict, it's a contest of wills, and people are involved. It's about people. And what we're seeing today is, you can influence someone before you're even at conflict with them, and you can influence them in the cyber domain.
I know that there's huge social media campaigns that occur before an actual battle ever occurs now.
Right.
Is that true?
You're exactly right. They will be working to shape and influence people's perceptions before a conflict even occurs, and hope that what happens is it's a fait accompli, that before we even fire a bullet, they've already won. And if you look at Russia and Ukraine, a little bit of that.
And as soon as it was time to turn conflict, it was already over.
Already over. They already had the territory. They already had what they wanted. Now they hold on to it. So this is new. And there are other aspects that are new. I would tell you that the speed of human velocity of human interaction is at a rate never before seen. You can put out a video and millions look at it. And when I was your age, there's no way I could get millions of people to look at anything. This has an impact in conflict. It has an impact in everything in our society. Business, sports, military, conflict. It's a huge impact.
Social medias have a huge impact. For at least a decade now, they have become a battleground for military forces. Reports from the US Congress have identified disinformation campaigns organized by a Russian agency called the Internet Research Agency, or IRA, during the 2016 US presidential campaigns. Disturbingly, this agency produced and shared content both against the Republican Party and in support of the Republican Party in the United States. Clearly, their goal was not to align themselves with either US party. IRA's goal seemed to be more to exacerbate polarization in the US by producing, sharing, and advertising some extremely divisive contents that sometimes caricatured the Black Lives Matter movement and sometimes caricatured the opposite side. In doing so, the IRA has certainly weakened the United States both politically and economically. Now, you might think that this is just a relic of the Cold War between two historical enemies. However, this cyber warfare that aims to change the perceptions of the general public of a country has become very widespread since 2016. The latest report from Oxford's Computational Propaganda Research Project, published in early 2021, now lists 81 countries whose organized disinformation activities on social medias have been revealed. Now, if you read this report, you will see, for instance, that France or Switzerland are not in the list. But actually, this is probably because the disinformation services of these countries have managed to avoid detection. More generally, we should keep in mind that these organized disinformation campaigns have enormous incentives to remain secret. As discussed in this book by Professor Samuel Woolley, a researcher on web propaganda, the scale of disinformation is probably even greater than this report reveals. Worryingly, organized disinformation is growing and becoming more professional. The report lists 48 countries that have hired private companies to do this disinformation work. These companies will typically create numerous fake accounts, either managed by bots or by human troll farms paid to amplify the disinformation. But governments seem to be far from being the only ones that engage in these disinformation campaigns. Private companies also have huge incentives to promote such or such belief in the public opinion, as was revealed in the case of tobacco. Moreover, in early 2021, the New York Times revealed a disinformation campaign by the company Huawei, which aimed to discredit a Belgian bill on a regulation of 5G antennas. Huawei had created 14 fake accounts claiming to be telecom experts that shared criticisms of the bill. Given that a $1 billion contract was at stake for the company, it is probably not surprising that Huawei indeed invested in this campaign. However, Huawei is far from being the only company with such huge incentives to influence public opinion. Google recently sought to silence the controversy following the dismantling of its ethics team, and even went so far as to modify its algorithms to make the news tab disappear when a US user searches for the word Timnit Gebru. Given the control that this company already has on the web and the inconsistencies between its public declarations and the testimonies of its researchers, I would bet with high credence that Google has massively invested in disinformation campaigns too, especially to discredit the expertise of Timnit Gebru and of Margaret Mitchell. Organized disinformation can then take other forms than simply generating and sharing content. To discredit or silence dissenting voices, some campaigns seem to rely on cyberbullying to discourage or to hope to make opponents of the campaign hysteric by sending harassment messages in public or in private. Other misinformation campaigns, however, seem to content to systematically like and retweet all messages that go their way and to ignore all others. This has the advantage of spreading more misinformation without putting oneself forward and thus avoiding being revealed. In fact, to fully appreciate the extent of organized disinformation campaigns, it is useful to look at the results of Facebook's effort to remove fake accounts. So what do you think? Given all of this, what is the number of fake accounts that Facebook removed from its platform in 2019? What is your Bayesian bet? Well, according to the numbers from Statista, which are consistent with numerous other figures found in the medias, Facebook removed 6 billion fake accounts in 2019. 6 billion fake accounts. This is huge. That's almost the number of humans on Earth. In particular, it's far more than the number of human Facebook users. On Facebook, most accounts are fake. And that's Facebook, which has a one account per human policy, which has armies of engineers to identify fake accounts and remove them, and which has significant incentives from advertisers to make sure that ads posted on Facebook lead to purchases. On other platforms like Twitter, Reddit or Parler, the proportion of fake accounts is certainly much higher. On these platforms, especially on polarizing topics and especially coming from anonymous accounts, we should probably expect that organized disinformation is the norm. Social networks are undoubtedly overrun by disinformation campaigns, and this makes them dangerous, very dangerous. In fact, it seems useful to consider that social medias have become a sort of huge territory which many entities want to conquer. To fully understand the battle that takes place there, it is then useful to understand the characteristic of the terrain on which the battle is taking place. And if there is one characteristic to understand about this terrain, it is undoubtedly the fact that it is governed by the quest for attention. As I said in the introduction, every time you open a social network on your phone or on your computer, the content that you will see is the result of a very complex story. The story involves, of course, the creators of the content, which, as we have seen, may be disinformation campaigns, but also and above all, you see the message that you see because an algorithm chose to show you this content rather than any of the billions of contents available on the social network. In a way, the algorithm is then the referee of the battle for attention. It decides which piece of ground will be won by which content creators. Now, one could imagine algorithms that aim to distribute the ground fairly or that seek to offer grounds to quality contents. But in practice, this is absolutely not the case. The algorithms deployed today to distribute the terrain of attention are designed almost exclusively to keep social network consumers on the social networks with little regard, if any, to the informational reliability or to consumer safety. If disinformation campaigns by Russian agencies or Chinese companies keep consumers on the platform, then algorithms will massively promote these campaigns. The algorithms want the user's attention on their platform, and they don't really care which part of the platform gets the attention. And this has dramatic consequences. For example, the US Congress investigation revealed that, disturbingly, for a mere $46,000, the Russian IRA's disinformation campaigns have been remarkably effective, affecting millions of Americans. Why? Because unlike the presidential candidates' ads, the IRA's ads were extremely enticing and addictive, so users exposed to these ads generally stayed longer on Facebook after consuming them. As a result, the cost per impression of these ads were much lower. Or put differently, social networks have created an information market where disinformation costs much less to produce and to disseminate than quality information. And unfortunately, this has consequences that go far beyond the case of disinformation. As Veritasium explains it very well, content creators today are all enormously influenced by the success of the content that they produced. Consciously or unconsciously, when a type of content is hugely successful, content creators will take note, and they will produce more of that type of content. Yet, on YouTube in particular, the influence of the algorithm on the success of a video is monumental. 2 out of 3 views on YouTube are the results of algorithmic recommendations. If the algorithm wants a passable video to get 1 million views, all it has to do is to recommend it massively, like hundreds of millions of times. But then, since creators adapt to success, and since the success is very much determined by the algorithm, according to Veritasium, the content is the algorithm. YouTube is what the recommendation algorithm promotes, not only via its direct influence, but also via its indirect influence on the creators. A corollary of this is that disinformation campaigns that like and retweet content that goes their way also have a similar indirect effect. Not only will doing so give some content more visibility than others, but perhaps more importantly still, these disinformation campaigns will encourage content creators to produce more content that goes their way. This is probably how Twitter has become extremely polarized and virulent. Not only is such content being promoted, but in addition, their prominence encourages all Twitter users, consciously or unconsciously, to be more polarized and virulent because these contents are more successful and thus flatter the ego of these Twitter users. And at my level, I definitely feel that, as I am unfortunately one of these users. This is how social networks have become an uncontrolled and uncontrollable jungle. Now, if it was just a jungle with no effect on the outside world, it might be cute. However, nowadays, this jungle has become extremely dangerous, not only because it is now dominated by disinformation campaigns, but also because cyberbullying, medical misinformation, and ideological radicalization triumph, which in turn cause horrible suffering, tragic deaths, and major concerns for the future of humanity. Social medias are dangerous, very dangerous. Given all of this, it seems urgent to me to protect humanity against these dangerous social medias. Of course, as an individual, you can stay away from these social medias. But as I talk about it here, I would advise you more to have a healthy and reasoned consumption of social medias, since studies suggest that such a consumption, let's say around 1 hour per day, especially if it is really oriented towards creating deep social links or towards consuming top quality contents, this kind of consumption seems beneficial. But of course, this is all up to you. However, and I cannot stress this enough, the danger of social medias is not an individual problem. Especially when it comes to public health or national security, the consumption of your fellow citizens can have major consequences on your own health and safety, especially when it comes to contagious diseases like COVID-19 or to geopolitical tensions. Therefore, it seems urgent to think more about how to make social medias beneficial. And to actually achieve this, it seems critical to realize that any social media that becomes influential will inevitably be attacked by all sorts of malicious actors who will want to promote their ideologies or products. The big challenge is not to design social medias that will be beneficial if everyone behaves nicely. The big challenge is to design social networks that will persist in being beneficial even when they are attacked from all sides by the most motivated and powerful groups, governments, and corporations in the world. In particular, to achieve this, recommendation and moderation seem critical. Indeed, the recent example of Parler really illustrates this clearly. Parler is an alternative to Twitter with minimal moderation, and it has since been invaded by American far-right movements that are also behind the Capitol riots. This example seems to really show how necessary content moderation is. At least that's what Google, Amazon, and Apple have concluded as they removed Parler from their service because Parler did not have enough moderation. However, this problem is absolutely not restricted to Parler. In fact, an NGO sued Apple for not removing from the Apple Store Telegram, a messaging app where radicalization seems even more prevalent. Similarly, much of the now President Bolsonaro's disinformation campaign in Brazil took place on WhatsApp, where there is no moderation or content recommendation. Social medias without moderation or recommendation algorithms therefore seem very vulnerable to disinformation or radicalization campaigns. Overall, it seems very inadequate to regard them as robustly beneficial. In fact, protecting social medias from such campaigns is a huge and very delicate task. That being said, the example of Taiwan may show us the way. To allow more constructive discussions, the Taiwanese government has organized a public debate on a platform called poll.is. This social network has the particularity to give major importance to its recommendation algorithm and to make sure that this algorithm promotes more consensual positions. Remarkably, this makes it possible to move forward much more quickly in the development of effective laws to solve controversial problems. Note that this approach does not hide disagreements at all. If many people do not agree with the most consensual positions on the platform, they can easily make it known, which will lower the ranking of the consensual position and potentially replace it with a more consensual position. Moreover, the degree to which the presented position is consensual can be taken into account by simply looking at the fraction of users who disagree. And on second thought, this may be a good solution to protect social medias from disinformation campaigns. Rather than constantly trying to put down disinformation, which seems doomed to fail given how preponderant it is, given how difficult it is to deconstruct it, and given that disinformation campaigns will adapt to all deconstructions, it seems much more effective to constantly put forward consensual information, or at least when it comes to science, more reliable information. And we'll talk more about this option in future videos and about the research projects that try to go in this direction. For the moment, unfortunately, social medias remain dangerous. Very dangerous. Probably even more dangerous than aviation, medical treatments, and nuclear energy, for which huge investments in certification authorities have been put in place. Arguably, it has become urgent to do the same for social medias, because social medias are dangerous. Very dangerous.
I find it fascinating that General Brown, a 4-star general, a person who wields incredible military might, is concerned about the cyber domain. You heard him say it, right? Several times. We like to think about this place that we gather, the internet place here, as just a fun, consequence-free place where we can like and upvote and comment and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. But come on, we can all feel it. We just don't know how to say it. I feel this us versus them thing, and I've seen really smart friends fall into it, and I'm guilty myself. I believe the biggest threat right now is division. They're going to find the division within our society, and they're going to try to amplify it. Political grace, basically the art of disagreeing well. This is the ultimate countermeasure to this kind of attack.